A bully pours glue on a quiet black girl's hair in the middle of a crowded school hallway, thinking she'll just walk away in shame. And she does, without saying a word. But what he doesn't know is that she's a trained black belt fighter, and that silence isn't fear, it's control. Days later, he sees her dominating grown men in an underground MMA ring, and that's just the beginning. Because what starts as a cruel joke turns into a legal firestorm that threatens to destroy everything he thought he could get away with. How far will she go to reclaim her dignity, without ever throwing a single punch at school? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The crisp autumn air nipped at Ayana's cheeks as she walked up the concrete steps of Crestview High. Her fingers gripped the cool metal of her first-place trophy from the state science competition, while the gold medal around her neck caught the morning sunlight. The weight of both felt familiar, like the dozens of other awards that lined her bedroom shelves at home. Students rushed past her through the heavy double doors, their backpacks bouncing and voices echoing in the crowded hallway. Ayana kept her pace steady, her head high, but her eyes focused straight ahead. She'd learned long ago that victory required more than just winning. It meant carrying success with quiet dignity. The morning announcements crackled through the old speaker system just as she reached her locker. Principal Chen's voice filled the hallway. Congratulations to junior Ayana Brooks for taking first place at the state science competition this weekend. Her project on sustainable urban agriculture earned the highest score in the competition's history. A scatter of applause broke out in the hallway. Some students turned to her with genuine smiles, offering quick, "way to go" comments as they passed. But Ayana didn't miss the other looks, the tight-lipped smirks and rolling eyes from clusters of students who quickly turned away to whisper among themselves. She carefully placed her trophy in her locker, making sure it wouldn't fall when she opened the door later. The medal she kept on, tucked beneath her navy sweater. Her mom had insisted she wear it today, saying, "Let your light shine, baby, don't let anyone dim it." The first period bell rang, and Ayana gathered her books for AP Biology. The classroom was on the third floor, and she took her time climbing the stairs, mentally reviewing the chapter they were supposed to discuss today. Science had always been her sanctuary, a place where facts were facts, where results spoke louder than assumptions, where merit mattered more than everything else. As she approached the classroom, she saw Jake Mitchell holding court in the hallway, surrounded by his usual group of admirers. His Letterman jacket stood out among the crowd, as did his loud laugh that seemed to bounce off the lockers. Ayana kept walking, her steps neither speeding up nor slowing down. But Jake had already spotted her. He stepped away from his friends, making an exaggerated bow as she passed. "Oh, look, everyone! Her royal genius graces us with her presence." His voice boomed through the hallway. "Shall we roll out the red carpet?" A ripple of giggles spread through the gathered students. Some looked uncomfortable but laughed anyway, while others seemed genuinely amused. Ayana kept walking, her face composed, her grip on her textbook slightly tighter than before. "What's wrong, Your Highness? Too smart to talk to us common folk?" Jake called after her, earning more laughs. Just then, Zoe appeared beside Ayana, falling into step with her friend. Her dark eyes flashed with anger, but she kept her voice low. "Ignore him. He's just mad because his daddy can't buy him a brain." They entered the classroom together, taking their usual seats near the front. As other students filed in, Zoe leaned closer to Ayana. "But seriously, girl, watch your back. They don't like when we win too hard." She gestured vaguely at the other students, most of whom came from Crestview's wealthiest families. Especially not twice in one semester. Ayana nodded slightly, remembering her victory at the Regional Math Olympiad just 2 months ago. She understood what Zoe meant. Success was acceptable in small doses, but too much excellence from the wrong kind of student disrupted the carefully maintained social order of Crestview High. The morning passed in a blur of classes and carefully avoided gazes. When lunch period arrived, Ayana sat at her usual table in the cafeteria, methodically arranging her food on the blue plastic tray. The medal still hung beneath her sweater, a secret reminder of her achievement. She had just opened her water bottle when she sensed rather than saw the approach of multiple people behind her. The cafeteria's usual buzz of conversation dimmed slightly, like someone had turned down the volume. Then came Jake's voice, closer than she expected. "Hey, genius, I got you a present." Before Ayana could react, she felt something cold and thick pouring onto her head. The white glue seeped through her carefully styled natural hair, dripping down her neck and onto her sweater. The bottle made a hollow sound as Jake squeezed it empty. "Guess even geniuses need hair products now," Jake's voice rang out across the suddenly silent cafeteria. Then came the laughter, some nervous, some cruel, all of it mixing with the sound of phone cameras clicking. Ayana sat perfectly still for a moment, feeling the glue slide down her back. Her hands remained flat on the table, neither shaking nor clenching into fists. She could see Zoe across the cafeteria, frozen in the lunch line, her face a mask of horror and rage. With deliberate movements, Ayana stood up from the table. Her chair scraped against the floor, the sound eerily loud in the charged atmosphere. She didn't look at Jake or his friends. She didn't acknowledge the phones pointed at her or the mix of shocked and amused faces surrounding her. Her expression remained unreadable as she walked toward the cafeteria doors, glue dripping with each step. The metal under her sweater felt heavier now, but she kept her head high, her steps measured, her breathing controlled. She had learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful response was no response at all. As she pushed through the cafeteria doors, she could hear the whispers starting up behind her, like wind through dry leaves. The cold water from the bathroom sink ran over Ayana's scalp, turning cloudy white as she methodically worked the glue from her hair. Her fingers moved with precise, controlled movements, neither rushing nor slowing as she separated each strand. The bathroom's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her face. Zoe hovered nearby, clutching paper towels and alternating between furious pacing and concerned glances at her friend. "We should report this. Like right now. I've got video evidence from 3 different angles already trending on social media. This is straight-up assault." "I'm fine," Ayana said. Her voice was quiet but carried the weight of steel. Water dripped down her neck, soaking the collar of her sweater, but she didn't seem to notice. "You're not fine. Nothing about this is fine." Zoe's voice echoed off the tiled walls. "Jake Mitchell is a racist jerk who needs to be—" "I said I'm fine." Ayana's tone hadn't changed, but something in it made Zoe fall silent. The steady stream of water continued to run, filling the tension between them. Zoe watched as Ayana reached for another paper towel, her movements deliberate and controlled. The medal from the science competition still hung around her neck, now spotted with dried glue. "At least let me help you," Zoe said softly, stepping forward with fresh paper towels. Ayana shook her head once, continuing her methodical cleaning. "I've got it." Her reflection in the mirror showed no anger, no hurt, no emotion at all. Just focus, as if she were solving another complex equation. The final bell rang, its distant sound muffled by the bathroom walls. Ayana straightened up, examining her work in the mirror. Most of the glue was gone, though her hair remained damp and slightly stiff in places. She dried her hands carefully, adjusted her sweater, and picked up her backpack. "Principal Langston wants to see you," Zoe said, checking her phone. "Jake too, but separately." Ayana nodded once as if this was exactly what she'd expected. She walked out of the bathroom, leaving Zoe staring after her, still clutching unused paper towels. Principal Langston's office smelled of coffee and artificial air freshener. He sat behind his large desk, fingers steepled, wearing the concerned expression he'd perfected over years of administration. "Ayana, please have a seat." She sat, back straight, hands folded in her lap. The chair was designed to make students feel small, but Ayana's posture gave away nothing. "I've heard about what happened in the cafeteria today," Langston began, his voice carrying what he probably thought was fatherly concern. "I want you to know we take these kinds of incidents seriously." Ayana remained silent, her dark eyes fixed on a point just above his left shoulder. "However," he continued, shifting slightly in his chair, "I think we need to keep this in perspective. Jake's a good kid who sometimes gets carried away. It was a harmless prank, the kind of thing that happens in high school." Still, Ayana said nothing. "I'll talk to Jake, of course." Langston leaned forward, his desk creaking slightly. But I want to give you some advice, Ayanna. You have tremendous potential. Your academic achievements speak for themselves. You don't want to let something like this become a distraction. Finally, Ayanna's eyes met his. The intensity of her gaze made him lean back slightly. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" he asked, his tone suggesting he hoped there wasn't. "No, sir," Ayanna replied, her voice perfectly neutral. Good. He smiled, relieved. "You can go then. Send Jake in on your way out." As Ayanna left the office, she saw Jake lounging in one of the waiting area chairs, scrolling through his phone with a smirk. He didn't look up as she passed. Later that evening, Ayanna sat at her family's dinner table, the smell of her mother's famous jerk chicken filling the kitchen. Her godfather, Malik, had joined them as he often did on Monday nights. The conversation flowed around her, talk of work, community events, and her weekend science victory. She ate methodically, participating in the discussion with brief responses when required. Her hair was now completely clean, though it had taken another thorough washing at home. She hadn't mentioned the incident at school. As her mother cleared the plates, Ayanna turned to Malik. "How exactly do legal self-defense laws work?" she asked, her tone casual. Malik's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, studying her face. "That's an interesting question. Any particular reason you're asking?" "Just curious about liability in hypothetical harassment cases," Ayanna replied, maintaining eye contact. "For instance, if someone repeatedly creates a hostile environment, what legal protections exist?" Malik leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. As a retired civil rights attorney, he recognized the weight behind such questions. Well, self-defense laws are complex, but they generally require a reasonable belief that you're in immediate danger. However, harassment cases often involve patterns of behavior rather than single incidents. He paused, choosing his words carefully. In school environments, there are additional considerations. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination in educational institutions. Then there's tort law regarding personal injury and emotional distress. Ayanna nodded, absorbing each word. "And what constitutes evidence in such cases?" "Documentation is crucial," Malik explained, his eyes never leaving her face. "Witness statements, video recordings, official complaints, medical reports if applicable. The key is establishing a pattern and showing that proper channels were given a chance to address the situation." Later that night, in the privacy of her bedroom, Ayanna sat at her desk, the soft glow of her laptop illuminating her face. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, searching for underground MMA gyms in the area. She opened multiple tabs comparing locations and schedules, making notes in her precise handwriting. The medal from the science competition hung on her bedpost, catching occasional glints of light from her screen. Her expression remained focused and unreadable as she continued her research, the quiet clicking of her keyboard the only sound in the dark room. The Tuesday morning sun filtered through Crestview High's windows, casting long shadows across the hallways. Students huddled in small groups, phones out, their whispers creating a constant buzz of conversation. The viral videos of yesterday's incident had spread like wildfire overnight, each share and comment adding fuel to the growing tension. Ayanna sat in her AP chemistry class, her posture perfect as always, taking detailed notes while Mr. Peterson explained molecular structures. Her phone vibrated silently in her pocket, another notification. She ignored it, just as she'd ignored the previous 47 that morning. During a brief pause in the lecture, she finally checked her school email. The message from administration sat bold at the top of her inbox. Important notice. Posting or circulating videos that invade student privacy may result in suspension. All students are reminded that recording and sharing footage of other students without consent violates school policy. Ayanna's expression didn't change as she read the email, but her grip on her phone tightened slightly. Around her, other students were checking their phones too, their reactions ranging from eye rolls to nervous glances in her direction. "Did you see they're taking down all the videos?" whispered Sarah, the girl sitting next to her. "My friend's post got deleted this morning." Ayanna continued writing her notes, her handwriting as precise as ever. The chemical equations flowed from her pen in perfect formation, each symbol exactly where it needed to be. By lunchtime, the atmosphere in the cafeteria had shifted. Where yesterday there had been obvious pointing and snickering, today there was an undercurrent of tension. Students spoke in hushed tones, phones mostly kept out of sight. Ayanna sat at her usual table, methodically eating her lunch while reading a physics textbook. Mrs. Rodriguez, her English teacher, approached the table quietly. "Ayanna, could I speak with you for a moment?" Ayanna marked her page carefully before following Mrs. Rodriguez to a quiet corner near the library. The teacher's face was lined with concern as she looked at her star student. "I wanted you to know," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly, "that sometimes silence is strength." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Just keep doing your work. Don't let this situation derail your focus." Ayanna nodded once, her face revealing nothing. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez." Across the cafeteria, raised voices drew attention. Jamal Watson, a junior known for his involvement in student government, stood at a table surrounded by a small group of students. His voice carried clearly across the room. "This isn't just about one incident," he was saying, his passion evident in every word. "It's about a pattern. We need accountability. We need dash." Before he could finish, Vice Principal Harris appeared at his side. "Mr. Watson, come with me, please." "I'm just talking to my friends," Jamal protested, but Harris's stern expression left no room for argument. "Now, Mr. Watson." As Jamal was led away, Jake Mitchell's laugh rang out from his table of football players. He sat sprawled in his chair, holding court among his teammates. "Look at that," he said, loud enough to carry. "She can't even fight back, none of them can." His friends laughed, though some looked uncomfortable. Jake's confidence had grown throughout the day, as it became clear there would be no real consequences for his actions. He caught Ayanna's eye across the cafeteria and smirked, making a show of running his hands through his hair. The afternoon classes passed slowly. Jamal didn't return to the cafeteria. Word spread that he'd been warned about escalating tensions and disrupting the school environment. Some students who had posted videos of the incident received emails requesting they remove them to maintain a positive school atmosphere. As evening approached, Ayanna stayed late in the library, finishing her calculus homework. The setting sun cast orange light through the windows when she finally packed up her books and headed for the parking lot. The school was mostly empty, just a few cars remaining in the staff section. She was halfway to her mother's car when the sound of boots on asphalt made her pause. Officer Darren Mitchell emerged from between two parked patrol cars, his uniform crisp, his badge catching the last rays of sunlight. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he approached. "Miss Brooks," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of false concern that police officers often used. "Fancy running into you here." Ayanna stood her ground as he drew closer, stopping just a bit too near for comfort. He towered over her, but she didn't step back. "Just making a courtesy call at the school," he continued, still wearing that practiced smile. "Checking in on some concerns about social media activity, videos being shared, that sort of thing." He leaned in slightly. "I hope we don't have to deal with any overreactions, Miss Brooks." The threat in his voice was subtle but clear. The badge on his chest gleamed as he shifted his weight, a reminder of his authority. Ayanna met his gaze directly, her face as unreadable as ever. "Neither do I, officer," she replied, her voice steady and cool. They held each other's stare for a long moment before Officer Mitchell straightened up, adjusting his belt with deliberate slowness. "Good evening then, Miss Brooks," he said, turning away with measured steps. Ayanna watched him walk back to his patrol car, waiting until he drove away before getting into her mother's car. The drive home was quiet, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Later that night in her bedroom, Ayanna sat cross-legged on her bed with her laptop. One by one, she pulled up her social media accounts. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, each one open in a separate tab. Without hesitation, she began the process of deactivation. As each account disappeared, she felt no regret, no uncertainty. Her finger clicked through the confirmation dialogues with the same precision she applied to her scientific calculations. When the last account was gone, she closed her laptop quietly and placed it on her desk. The room was silent except for the soft whir of her ceiling fan. Her phone lay dark and quiet beside her, freed from the constant buzz of notifications. On her wall, the medal from the science competition caught the light from her desk lamp, throwing small reflections across the room. The industrial district loomed gray and imposing in the late afternoon sun. Warehouses lined the cracked streets like silent sentinels, their metal walls reflecting dull light. Ayana walked purposefully down the empty sidewalk, her backpack still heavy with schoolbooks. She'd changed into dark workout clothes after school, a black hoodie pulled up to shadow her face. The address she'd found led to a weathered building that looked abandoned at first glance. No signs marked its purpose, just faded numbers above a heavy metal door. Through the high windows, she could hear the muffled sounds of activity inside. Thuds, grunts, the rhythmic slap of fists against equipment. Ayana pulled open the door and stepped into a different world. The warehouse interior was transformed into what locals called the Pit, an underground MMA training facility. The space smelled of sweat and leather, with rubber mats covering most of the concrete floor. Heavy bags hung in one corner, speed bags in another. A raised boxing ring dominated the center, while several grappling areas filled the remaining space. She melted into the shadows near the entrance, observing. In the ring, two fighters moved with controlled violence. A muscular woman with close-cropped hair drove her knee into her opponent's midsection, following through with a precise elbow strike. The man blocked barely before retaliating with a combination of punches that forced the woman to retreat. On the mats, other fighters drilled techniques or sparred at varying intensities. Some moved with fluid grace, others with raw power. Everyone seemed focused, disciplined. No one paid attention to the quiet teenager watching from the periphery, except one person. Reina Alvarez stood near the ring, her arms crossed as she observed the sparring match. Even from a distance, Ayana could see the scars that marked the ex-fighter's face and arms, badges of honor from a career spent in professional cages. Her dark eyes missed nothing, scanning the room constantly, which is how she noticed Ayana almost immediately. After giving brief instructions to the fighters in the ring, Reina moved through the gym with casual authority. Fighters nodded respectfully as she passed. She stopped a few feet from Ayana, studying her with an experienced eye. "You don't belong here," Reina said bluntly, her voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who'd taken too many throat strikes over the years. "This place isn't for revenge." Ayana met her gaze steadily. "I don't want revenge," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. "I want control." Reina's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps. She gestured toward an empty section of mat. "Show me." Ayana set down her backpack and followed. Reina grabbed 2 pairs of training gloves, tossing one set to Ayana. "Put these on. We'll go light." They faced each other on the mat. Reina demonstrated a basic fighting stance, then nodded for Ayana to mirror it. The teenager's form was awkward, unpracticed, but she adjusted quickly to Reina's corrections. "Hands up, protect your face," Reina instructed, throwing a slow jab that Ayana tried to block. Again. They moved through basic combinations. Ayana's strikes were clumsy but measured. She didn't flinch when Reina's punches came close, didn't lose her composure when she missed blocks. Most importantly, she didn't show frustration or anger when she made mistakes. After 15 minutes, Reina stepped back. She studied Ayana with new interest, noting the girl's steady breathing and focused expression. Where most beginners showed either fear or misplaced aggression, Ayana displayed something else, a deep analytical calm. "You're not here to hurt someone," Reina said. It wasn't a question. "No," Ayana confirmed. "I'm here to learn." Reina nodded slowly. "I'll train you," she decided. "Under one condition. You listen. You don't snap. This isn't about unleashing anger. It's about mastering yourself. Understand?" "Yes, good. Let's begin." The next hour was brutal. Reina drove Ayana through basic drills, proper punching technique, footwork, defensive movements. She corrected every flaw, pushed through every sign of fatigue. Ayana's arms burned, her legs trembled, but she didn't complain. By the end, Ayana's hoodie was soaked with sweat. Her knuckles were red and raw despite the gloves. Small bruises were already forming on her forearms from blocking drills, but her eyes remained clear and focused. "Same time tomorrow," Reina said, helping Ayana unwrap her hands. "Bring hand wraps and a mouth guard. You'll need them." Ayana nodded, gathering her things. Other fighters gave her appraising looks as she left. They'd seen countless beginners come and go, but something about this one felt different. The sun was setting when Ayana arrived home. Her mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up as Ayana entered, noting her daughter's disheveled appearance and the way she moved carefully, like someone testing newly discovered muscles. "Are you okay?" her mother asked, concern evident in her voice. Ayana's lips curved into a slight smile, the first genuine one in days. "I'm learning," she said simply, heading upstairs to shower. Across town, the football team was finishing their afternoon practice. Jake Mitchell stood with his usual group of teammates, laughing loudly at someone's joke. But there was an edge to his laughter that hadn't been there before. "Did you see Brooks today?" one of his friends asked. "She just sits there in class, taking notes like nothing happened." "Yeah, well, what's she gonna do?" Jake replied, but his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. The videos of the incident had disappeared, but whispers remained. Students noticed how Ayana moved through the halls, not defeated, but deliberate. How she watched everything but reacted to nothing. How her silence seemed less like submission and more like calculation. Jake's laughter grew louder, more forced as his teammates continued talking. But his eyes held a new tension, a growing unease. Ayana's quiet composure was starting to feel less like victory and more like waiting. He couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somehow, the power in their dynamic had shifted, and he wasn't sure when or how it had happened. Dawn crept through Ayana's bedroom window, painting her walls in soft morning light. Her muscles protested as she sat up, a reminder of yesterday's training session. Every movement brought a new ache, her shoulders, her core, even muscles she didn't know existed before. But beneath the soreness lay something else. A quiet alertness, like her body had awakened to new possibilities. She went through her morning routine methodically, paying extra attention to her joints and muscles as she stretched. The mirror reflected fresh bruises on her forearms, small badges of progress that she carefully covered with long sleeves. Her mother noticed her moving more deliberately at breakfast but didn't comment, just watched with a mixture of concern and curiosity as Ayana ate with focused determination. The halls of Crestview High felt different now. Students still stared as she passed, their whispers following like shadows. But their words seemed to slide off her now, unable to penetrate the calm focus she'd found in the pit. She moved with purpose, her steps measured and controlled, just as Reina had taught her. At her locker, Ayana methodically arranged her books for first period. The familiar sound of Jake's swagger, that particular combination of heavy footsteps and entitled confidence, approached from behind. She continued organizing her materials, not acknowledging his presence. "Thought you were smarter than this," Jake muttered as he passed, just loud enough for her to hear. His words carried a threat wrapped in false concern, the kind of subtle intimidation that had always worked before. Ayana closed her locker with deliberate care, her movements smooth and unhurried. Jake's steps faltered slightly when she didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even turn to look at him. He couldn't see the slight smile that touched her lips as she headed to class. He didn't know about the pit, about the strength building in her muscles, about the power of choosing when not to fight. Not yet. The school day passed in a blur of classes and careful navigation. Ayana took detailed notes, answered questions when called upon, and maintained her perfect academic performance. But her mind often drifted to the warehouse, to Reina's lessons, to the feeling of finally taking control of her own story. After the final bell, Ayana made her way back to the pit. The familiar smell of leather and sweat greeted her as she pushed through the heavy door. Reina stood near the speed bags, watching her approach with appraising eyes. "Ready?" Reina asked, though it wasn't really a question. Ayana nodded, already moving to wrap her hands the way she'd been taught. "Today we learn about rhythm," Reina announced, leading her to an open space on the mat. "Fighting isn't just about muscle, it's about flow, about breathing, about finding your internal tempo. She demonstrated a simple combination: jab, cross, hook, but with an emphasis on breath control. Inhale as you prepare, exhale as you strike. Your breath gives power to your punches. It centers you. Ayanna mimicked the movements, trying to sync her breathing with each strike. Her first attempts were clumsy, the timing off, but she kept at it, adjusting, observing, learning. She didn't get frustrated when she missed the rhythm, just reset and tried again. "Good," Reina noted after an hour of practice. "You're patient. Most people want to rush, to force it. But you watch, you adapt." They took a break, sitting on the edge of the mat with water bottles. Ayanna listened intently as Reina spoke about rhythm in different contexts, in boxing, in grappling, in life itself. "I learned these lessons the hard way," Reina said, absently touching a scar above her eyebrow. "Was rising fast in pro MMA, had a shot at the title. Then I started speaking up about the racism I saw, the way they marketed Latina fighters, the different standards, the subtle discrimination in judging." She took a long drink of water before continuing. "They didn't like that. Started getting harder matchups, less promotion. Finally got pushed out completely. But you know what? I found my own rhythm. Built this place. Now I train fighters my way." Ayanna absorbed this information silently, recognizing the weight of trust in Reina's sharing. She saw parallels in their stories. Different circumstances, but similar battles against systems designed to keep them quiet. Training resumed with new intensity. Reina pushed Ayanna through combinations that grew progressively more complex, always emphasizing breath control and rhythm. By the end of the session, Ayanna was exhausted, but moving with noticeably more fluidity. As other fighters began leaving for the night, Ayanna stayed. She moved to the parking lot outside, finding a spot under a single street lamp. The night air was cool against her skin as she practiced the movement drills Reina had taught her. From her office window, Reina watched her new student with growing respect. Ayanna's shadow danced across the pavement as she repeated the combinations over and over, each repetition slightly smoother than the last. Her dedication was evident in every controlled movement, every measured breath. Across town, Jake Mitchell sprawled on his bed, mindlessly scrolling through social media. His thumb paused on a video from the Pit's Instagram page. The footage was intentionally grainy, showing a fighter known only as Ghost working the heavy bag with precise measured strikes. Something about the fighter's movement caught his attention: their control, their patience, their rhythm. He watched the video several times, trying to make out details through the blur. The name stuck with him: Ghost. It seemed fitting for the mysterious figure who moved like a shadow in the dim gym lighting. Jake didn't recognize the fighter, couldn't even tell their size or gender through the intentionally obscured footage. But something about their presence made him uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. He continued scrolling, but his mind kept returning to the video, to that name, Ghost, and to the strange feeling that something was shifting in his carefully controlled world. The warehouse hummed with energy as Ayanna followed Reina through the crowd. Friday night fights at the Pit drew a different atmosphere than the daily training sessions: raw, electric, dangerous. The air was thick with anticipation and the sharp smell of liniment oil. Fighters warmed up in corners while spectators placed quiet bets among themselves. Reina had invited her to observe, to feel the energy of real competition. "Learning isn't just about training," she'd explained. "You need to understand the atmosphere, the pressure, how it changes everything." They found spots near the ring, really just a raised platform with ropes, where Reina could explain the technical aspects of each match. Ayanna absorbed everything silently, her eyes tracking every movement, every reaction, every shift in momentum. The fights progressed through the night, some technical, others brutal, each teaching its own lessons. Ayanna watched them all with the same intense focus she brought to her studies, mentally cataloging techniques and strategies. Then came the disruption. Reina's phone buzzed. Her expression darkened as she read the message. "Martinez is out," she muttered, scanning the crowd. "Food poisoning. Can't make his match." The announcement rippled through the warehouse. The scheduled fighter's absence threatened to derail the night's momentum. Spectators grumbled, Fighters whispered, and the energy began to scatter. Reina turned to Ayana, her eyes sharp and evaluating. "No pressure," she said quietly, "but this is the beginning if you want it." Ayana met her mentor's gaze. In that moment, everything she'd learned, from the science competitions to the hallway confrontations to the endless training sessions, crystallized into a single point of clarity. She nodded once. No fear. Reina moved quickly, handling the arrangements. Ayana changed into borrowed gear, her movements deliberate and focused. The opponent would be bigger, more experienced, a local fighter named Marcus who'd been competing in underground matches for years. As Ayana wrapped her hands, Reina gave her final instructions. "Remember your breathing. Find his rhythm before he finds yours. You're not here to overpower him. You're here to outlast him." The ring looked different from inside the ropes. Lights felt brighter, space seemed smaller, and the crowd's energy pressed in from all sides. Ayana stood in her corner, face hidden beneath her hood, now officially fighting under the name Ghost. Marcus sized her up from across the ring, probably assuming this would be an easy replacement match. He was taller, heavier, with the confident stance of experience. When the bell rang, he came forward aggressively, looking to end things quickly. But Ayana had spent her whole life dealing with people who underestimated her. She moved like water, letting his first combinations pass through empty air. Her footwork, drilled countless times under Reina's watchful eye, kept her just out of range. The crowd's energy shifted as the first round progressed. What they'd expected to be a quick mismatch became something else entirely. Marcus couldn't land cleanly on his smaller opponent. Meanwhile, Ayana picked her moments carefully, delivering precise counters that scored points without taking unnecessary risks. In the second round, Marcus's frustration became evident. He pushed harder, threw with more power, tried to cut off the ring. But Ayana had learned patience long before stepping into this ring. She read his rhythm, the slight drop of his shoulder before a hook, the shift of weight that telegraphed his kicks, and moved accordingly. Her counter-strikes, while not devastating, were clean and strategic. A quick jab when he overextended. A sharp kick to the thigh when he planted his feet. Small victories that accumulated like compound interest. By the third round, the warehouse was buzzing with whispers. Marcus was breathing heavily, his movements becoming predictable with fatigue. Ayana remained composed, her cardio built through countless hours of training. She increased her output gradually, each combination precise and purposeful. The final bell rang. Marcus slumped against the ropes, exhausted and frustrated. Ayana stood calmly in her corner, barely winded. When the referee raised her hand in victory, the crowd erupted, not just for the win, but for the display of technical skill and strategic thinking. Reina was stunned. She'd seen Ayana's potential in training, but this was different. The girl hadn't just won. She'd controlled every aspect of the fight. She'd turned her opponent's aggression against him, used his experience as a weapon against his ego, and remained completely composed throughout. As other fighters and spectators gathered around whispering about the mysterious ghost who'd appeared from nowhere, Reina led Ayana back to the locker area. She handed her a towel, her eyes full of pride and something like wonder. "Now you know what control feels like," Reina said softly. Ayana nodded, removing her hood. Her face was quiet, but her eyes were alive with a new energy. She'd felt it in there. Not just the physical control, but something deeper. The power of choosing when to engage, when to retreat, when to counter. It was everything she'd been seeking since that day in the cafeteria. Across town, Jake lounged at his friend Tyler's house, both of them scrolling mindlessly through social media. Tyler's thumb suddenly stopped on a video, his eyes widening. "Bro, is that Ayana?" Tyler shoved the phone toward Jake. The video showed highlights from the underground match. Despite the intentionally grainy quality, something about the smaller fighters' movement was distinctive, the way they absorbed pressure without breaking. The calculated responses, the absolute control. Jake watched the video 3 times, his characteristic smirk fading with each viewing. The fighter moved with the same quiet intensity he'd seen in the hallways, the same unshakable composure that had started to haunt him since the glue incident. The username Ghost floated beneath the video, but Jake barely noticed it. He was too focused on the footage itself, the way the smaller fighter systematically dismantled their larger opponent, not with power but with patience and precision. His smirk disappeared completely as the implications sank in. The Monday morning sun filtered through the high windows of the boys' locker room, casting long shadows across the metal benches. Jake sat alone, his football gear untouched beside him as he hunched over his phone. His thumbs moved frantically, replaying the same clips over and over. Grainy footage from the pit showing the mysterious fighter known only as Ghost. Something about the way Ghost moved kept drawing him back. He zoomed in on the footage, studying the fighter's stance. There was a familiar quality to it, the way they held themselves, patient and composed, even under pressure. It reminded him of someone, and that thought made his stomach twist. The bell rang, but Jake barely noticed. He was too focused on a particular moment in the video where Ghost dodged a wild punch, their movement efficient and calculated. It was the same kind of quiet precision he'd seen in AP Bio class, watching Ayana methodically complete lab work while others fumbled with their equipment. "Can't be her," he muttered to himself, but his voice lacked conviction. He'd been watching these clips for hours now, and each viewing only strengthened his suspicion. The way Ghost absorbed pressure without breaking, the calculated responses, the absolute control, it all screamed Ayana Brooks. The locker room began filling with other players, their loud chatter bouncing off the walls. Jake quickly closed the video, but his mind stayed fixed on it. His teammates noticed his distraction during morning practice as he missed simple plays and dropped easy passes. "Mitchell, get your head in the game," Coach Barrett shouted after Jake's third fumble. But Jake's thoughts were elsewhere, spinning through possibilities and implications. In class, his usual confident swagger felt forced. His jokes came out sharper, more aggressive, tinged with an edge of desperation that his friends noticed, but didn't mention. During history, he made a loud crack about certain people thinking they're better than everyone else, but it fell flat when Ayana didn't even glance his way. By lunch period, the tension had built to a breaking point. The cafeteria buzzed with its usual activity, students clustering at their usual tables, the smell of mediocre food hanging in the air. Jake watched Ayana enter with her lunch tray, moving with that same measured grace he'd seen in the videos. Something snapped. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that drew attention. Several students turned to watch as he strode toward Ayana's table, phone clutched in his hand like a weapon. "You think you're so smart," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. "Training to kill people now, huh?" The lunchroom quieted. A few students pulled out their phones, sensing drama. Ayana continued eating her lunch, not looking up. "What, nothing to say?" Jake pressed, his voice rising. "Everyone knows it's you in those videos. Ghost, right? That's what they call you?" The silence stretched. Other students watched the scene unfold, some uncomfortable, others curious. Jake felt sweat beading on his forehead as Ayana continued to ignore him. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes met his with that same unshakable composure that had been haunting him since the glue incident. "You really don't know how to shut up, do you?" she said, her voice cool and level. The cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. There was something in her tone, not threat, not anger, but a kind of terrible certainty that made Jake take an involuntary step back. For the first time, he felt truly afraid of the quiet girl he'd been tormenting. He tried to cover his reaction with a scoff, but it came out weak and unconvincing. Without another word, he turned and stormed out of the cafeteria, leaving his lunch untouched and his friends exchanging worried glances. That evening, Jake paced in his father's home office, his earlier bravado replaced by genuine panic. Officer Darren Mitchell sat behind his desk, watching his son with growing concern. "She's planning something, I know it," Jake said, running his hands through his hair. "She's in those fights. You should see the videos, Dad. The way she moves. It's her. I know it's her." Officer Mitchell leaned back in his chair, his face settling into the calm, professional mask he wore when handling difficult situations. "Show me," he said. Jake pulled up the videos, explaining his suspicions in a rush of words. His father watched silently, his expression growing darker with each clip. "And now she's got this look," Jake continued, "like she's just waiting. Like she knows something I don't. You have to do something, Dad." Officer Mitchell stood up, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Leave her to me," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority he'd cultivated over years of service. As Jake left the office, visibly relieved to have passed the problem to his father, Officer Mitchell began making notes. He knew how to handle situations like this, how to apply pressure through official channels, how to make problems disappear without leaving fingerprints. He'd start with a few casual conversations with his contacts at the school board, maybe arrange for some extra patrols around known fighting locations. Meanwhile, across town, the lights of the pit blazed in the darkness. Inside, Ayanna moved through her drills with mechanical precision. Sweat darkened her shirt as she worked the heavy bag, each strike perfectly placed, each combination flowing smoothly into the next. Raina watched from the corner, noting how her student had progressed. There was no wasted motion, no flash, just pure efficiency. Even now, after hours of training, Ayanna's form remained crisp and controlled. The rhythm of her strikes echoed through the empty gym. Jab, cross, move, defend. Each impact told a story of patience and preparation. She wasn't training for revenge or glory. She was training for something more fundamental: the right to exist without fear, the power to maintain control in a world that wanted to take it from her. As the night grew deeper, Ayanna continued her work, silent, methodical, ready. The Tuesday afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of Crestview High's law classroom. Students shifted in their seats as Officer Darren Mitchell stood at the front, his police uniform pressed and pristine, badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His presence commanded attention, but Ayanna Brooks sat perfectly still in the third row, her posture relaxed yet alert. "Today we're going to discuss something important," Mitchell began, his voice carrying that practiced tone of authority. "The rising concern of youth violence in our community." His eyes swept the room, lingering just a fraction too long on Ayanna. The projector hummed to life, displaying statistics about teenage fighting and gang activity. Mitchell clicked through slides showing grainy photos of underground fighting venues, careful to keep his expression appropriately concerned. "What many young people don't realize," he continued, pacing slowly across the front of the room, "is how easily they can be drawn into dangerous situations. Underground combat sports, for instance, might seem exciting or empowering." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But they're illegal for a reason." Several students glanced nervously at Ayanna, but she remained focused on her notebook, taking careful notes as if this were any other lecture. Her pen moved steadily across the page, recording Mitchell's words without commentary. "We're seeing a disturbing trend of self-radicalization through these activities," Mitchell said, his voice growing stern. "Young people who feel marginalized or angry might think fighting is the answer, but violence only leads to more violence." The classroom felt tense. A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the subtext of Mitchell's words clear to everyone present. But Ayanna's expression remained neutral, her breathing steady and controlled. "As your school resource officer," Mitchell continued, now standing directly in front of Ayanna's desk, "it's my duty to protect you all. That includes protecting you from yourselves sometimes." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Smart students, especially those with bright futures, shouldn't risk throwing everything away for some misguided sense of justice. The bell rang, startling several students. As chairs scraped and backpacks rustled, Mitchell's voice cut through the noise. "Miss Brooks, could you stay back a moment? I'd like to discuss your interest in law enforcement as a career." Ayanna packed her bag slowly, methodically, as the room emptied. She could feel Mitchell's eyes on her, watching her every move. When the last student left, she stood calmly, bag over her shoulder. "Let's talk outside," Mitchell said, gesturing to the door. "More private." They walked in silence through the emptying hallways and out into the afternoon air. Mitchell led them to a spot behind the building, away from the main entrance where students were streaming out. The brick walls rose high on either side, and Ayanna noted the absence of security cameras in this particular corner. Mitchell's friendly demeanor dropped as soon as they were alone. He stepped closer, using his height to loom over her. "A smart girl like you doesn't want to be associated with dangerous things," he said, his voice low and measured. "Underground things. You get me?" Ayanna stood her ground, her eyes steady on his face. She didn't step back, didn't show any sign of intimidation. The corner of her mouth twitched slightly, almost imperceptibly. "You're scared of what I could do," she said quietly. "That's new for you." Mitchell's face tightened, a flash of anger breaking through his professional mask. But before he could respond, Ayanna turned and walked away, her steps unhurried and deliberate. She could feel his eyes boring into her back, but she didn't look back. The evening brought a different kind of tension to Ayanna's home. The smell of her mother's cooking filled the kitchen, chicken curry simmering on the stove, rice steaming in the cooker. Malik Devor sat at the kitchen table, his briefcase placed beside him, watching Ayanna with careful eyes as she helped set the table. "You've been quiet lately," he observed, his deep voice gentle. "More than usual." Ayanna placed the last fork on the table, then sat down heavily. The weight of the past weeks seemed to settle on her shoulders all at once. She looked at Malik, her godfather, her mentor, the man who had taught her to think strategically since she was old enough to play chess. "They're trying to trap me," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mitchell came to school today. Gave this whole speech about youth violence and illegal fighting. He pulled me aside after, tried to scare me." Malik leaned forward, his elbows on the table. And I need to know how to beat them without fighting." Ayanna's hands clenched briefly before relaxing. "The physical training. It helps. It gives me control. But that's not how I win this." A small smile crossed Malik's face. He reached for his briefcase, the leather worn smooth from years of use. "Then we use their rules against them," he said, pulling out a stack of legal documents. "We play chess, not war." He spread the papers across the table. Civil rights statutes, school board policies, precedent cases involving student harassment and administrative negligence. Ayanna leaned forward, her eyes scanning the documents with growing interest. "See, they think they're playing checkers," Malik continued, pointing to specific sections. "Moving in straight lines, trying to force you into a corner. But we're going to play chess. Every move they make opens up new possibilities for us." Ayanna picked up one of the documents, reading carefully. "The school's liability in cases of known harassment." "Exactly." Malik pulled out more papers. "Every email, every video, every incident report, they're all pieces on our board. Mitchell's little speech today, that's evidence of targeted intimidation by a law enforcement officer against a minor." A plan began to take shape as they pored over the documents. Ayanna's mother joined them, adding her own insights from years of navigating institutional barriers. The kitchen filled with the sounds of papers shuffling, quiet discussion, and the occasional clink of curry spoons against bowls. They worked late into the evening, mapping out moves and countermoves, building a strategy that would use the system's own rules as weapons. Ayanna felt something shifting inside her. Not just anger or determination, but understanding. This was a different kind of fight, one that required the same patience and precision she'd learned in the pit, but with laws instead of fists. The morning sun cast long shadows across the school courtyard as students huddled around their phones, faces illuminated by the blue glow of Instagram. Jake's latest story spread like wildfire, a grainy but recognizable image of Ayanna at the pit, her silhouette unmistakable against the warehouse walls. The caption beneath read, "Violent Genius Energy." Whispers filled the hallways. Students pointed and stared as Ayanna walked past, her face a mask of calm indifference. Some looked afraid, others excited by the drama. A few loyal friends tried to warn her about the post, but she merely nodded, continuing her day as if nothing had changed. During her free period, Ayanna slipped away to the pit. The familiar smell of sweat and leather greeted her as she pushed through the heavy metal door. Raina stood by the boxing ring, wrapping a student's hands with practiced precision. "Your picture's making rounds," Raina said without looking up. She finished the wrap with a sharp tug, Your anonymity won't last much longer. Ayana dropped her bag by the wall. I know. You ready for what that means? Reina turned to face her, arms crossed. The fluorescent lights caught the scar above her eyebrow, a reminder of her own battles in and out of the ring. I've been ready, Ayana replied, starting her warm-up stretches. Her movements were fluid now, weeks of training evident in every controlled motion. The afternoon brought a different kind of tension to Crestview High. Officer Darren Mitchell's patrol car sat prominently in the visitors' parking spot, his presence announced by the squeak of his polished boots on the linoleum floors. This time he wore his full uniform, complete with utility belt and body camera. He found Ayana between classes, smartphone mounted on a professional-looking gimbal. The red recording light blinked steadily as he approached. Miss Brooks. His voice boomed through the hallway, forcing nearby students to stop and stare. Just the student I was hoping to see. We're doing some youth mentorship videos today. Ayana stood perfectly still, textbooks held close to her chest. Her eyes flickered to Mrs. Henderson, her English teacher, who watched from her classroom doorway but remained silent. Tell us about your extracurricular activities, Mitchell continued, the camera hovering uncomfortably close to her face. I hear you're quite active after school hours. I study, Ayana replied evenly. I prepare for college. Any physical activities? Mitchell's smile didn't reach his eyes. Combat sports, perhaps? Students gathered at the edges of the scene, phones out, recording the interaction. Mrs. Henderson shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. I focus on academics, Ayana said, her voice steady. If you'll excuse me, I have class. Now, Mitchell stepped closer, blocking her path. We're just having a friendly chat about youth engagement. You wouldn't want to seem uncooperative, would you? The hallway fell silent except for the soft sounds of recording devices. Ayana met Mitchell's gaze, her expression neutral. Am I being detained, officer? Mitchell's smile tightened. Of course not. This is just a friendly conversation. Then I'm going to class. Ayana stepped around him, her movements precise and controlled. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes following her, hear the whispers already starting. By evening, the footage had been edited and uploaded to a far-right TikTok account with over 50,000 followers. The video, heavily cut and manipulated, painted a sinister picture. Violent black teen uses underground fighting to threaten classmates. In Malik's home office, Ayana sat beside her godfather, watching the clip loop on his desktop monitor. The comments section filled with racist rhetoric and calls for her expulsion. Some users were already trying to dox her, sharing what they claimed was her personal information. They're getting desperate, Malik observed, his voice calm but tight with controlled anger. This kind of obvious manipulation, it's sloppy. They want you to react, to swing first. He turned to look at her. You won't. Ayana leaned back in her chair, eyes still fixed on the screen. No, she agreed. I'll let them punch air while I build my case. Malik nodded, reaching for a thick manila folder on his desk. He spread out documents across the polished wood surface, screenshots of teacher emails expressing concern about Jake's behavior, witness statements from students who'd seen the glue incident, a copy of the school's threatening email about video circulation. Look at this pattern, he said, arranging the papers chronologically. First, they try to silence you through school administration. When that doesn't work, they escalate to direct intimidation. Now they're trying to control the narrative, paint you as the aggressor. But they're leaving evidence, Ayana noted, picking up one of the emails. Every move they make, they're documenting their own harassment. Exactly. Malik pulled out a fresh legal pad. They're so focused on trying to break you, they don't see the trap they're walking into. Each post, each video, each casual conversation, it's all ammunition for us. He began writing, his pen moving swiftly across the yellow paper. We'll need to move carefully now. Document everything. Save every post, every comment. Record every interaction with Mitchell or school officials. Ayana watched him work, her mind already mapping out the next steps. The viral video continued to play silently on the monitor, but she no longer saw herself as the target they wanted her to be. Instead, she saw each frame as another piece of evidence, another link in the chain they were forging around themselves. "They think they're hunting me," she said quietly. "They don't realize they're just leaving footprints." Malik smiled grimly as he continued to assemble the files, organizing their growing collection of evidence. Each document told part of a larger story, not of a violent teen, but of systematic harassment and institutional failure. The truth was there in black and white, waiting to be revealed at the perfect moment. The morning light filtered through Crestview High's windows, casting long shadows across the hallway as Ayanna walked to her first class. The usual morning chatter died down to hushed whispers as she passed. Students pressed themselves against lockers, creating a visible path before her, some from fear, others from a misplaced sense of respect. Jamal appeared at her left shoulder, his tall frame acting as a buffer between her and the staring crowd. Zoe fell into step on her right, clutching her books tightly to her chest. Neither spoke, but their presence sent a clear message. Ayanna wasn't alone. "Ghost," someone whispered, the word echoing in the sudden quiet. Another voice. "Did you see the video?" A freshman quickly pocketed his phone as Ayanna passed, but not before she caught a glimpse of the viral TikTok playing on his screen. Officer Mitchell's edited footage had racked up hundreds of thousands of views overnight. Near the science wing, a group of seniors watched her approach. One of them, Marcus, captain of the debate team, gave her a subtle nod. A few others followed suit, their eyes showing silent support, but their mouths remained firmly shut. The message was clear. They were on her side, but not enough to risk their own standing. "They're cowards," Jamal muttered under his breath. "They're scared," Zoe corrected, her voice equally low. "There's a difference." Ayanna kept walking, her face composed, her steps measured. She'd learned from Reyna that rhythm mattered. In fighting, in walking, in breathing. Keep the pace steady. Never show hesitation. The morning classes passed in a blur of sideways glances and uncomfortable silences. Teachers called on her less, as if afraid her answers might somehow trigger another incident. In AP Chemistry, her lab partner asked to switch groups, claiming she felt uncomfortable. The teacher agreed without meeting Ayanna's eyes. After the final bell rang, Ayanna made her way to the pit. The warehouse looked different in the afternoon light, less mysterious, more worn. The metal door creaked as she pushed it open, the familiar smell of leather and sweat greeting her. Reyna stood in the center of the main ring, watching two fighters spar. She held up a hand, stopping the match, when she saw Ayanna approach. "Office," she said simply, jerking her head toward the small room in the corner. Inside, Reyna closed the door and leaned against her desk, arms crossed. The fluorescent light highlighted the scars on her forearms, badges of honor from years in professional fights. "You've got a choice to make," Reyna said without preamble. "The video's spreading. People are connecting dots. You want to fight in the open again. You need to decide. Are you Ghost or are you Ayanna? You can't be both forever." Ayanna set her bag down, considering the question. The name Ghost had been her shield, allowing her to exist in two worlds, the quiet, controlled student and the fighter who moved like shadow. But now those worlds were colliding. "I want to fight this weekend," she said finally. Reyna's eyes narrowed. "You sure that's smart right now?" "I need it." "Need or want?" "There's a difference." Reyna pushed off from the desk, moving closer. "If you fight emotionally, you lose. That's not just true in the ring." "I know." Ayanna met her mentor's gaze steadily. "I'm not fighting to prove anything. I'm fighting because it's what I do now. It's part of who I am." Reyna studied her face for a long moment, searching for any crack in the composure. Finally, she nodded. "Saturday night. Lower card, but good exposure. Don't make me regret this." Later that evening, Ayanna returned to school for her textbooks. The hallways were empty, her footsteps echoing against the linoleum floors. As she opened her locker, 2 folded papers fell out. The first note was written in careful handwriting. We see you. We support you. Stay strong. No signature, but the paper was high quality, possibly from a teacher's desk. The second note was different. Cheap paper, angry letters pressed deep enough to tear the page. You'll never belong here, monkey. Ayana studied both notes with the same careful attention. No reaction crossed her face as she opened her journal, a thick notebook filled with training schedules, legal research, and documented incidents. She folded both papers carefully and slipped them between the pages, adding them to her growing collection of evidence. Her phone buzzed, Malik's number lighting up the screen. She answered on the second ring. "I've reviewed everything," he said without greeting. The social media posts, the edited footage, the pattern of harassment. It's time to draft the complaint. You ready? Ayana touched the spine of her journal, feeling the slight bulge where the notes were pressed between its pages. Every threat, every act of support, every moment of institutional failure, all documented, all waiting to be used. "Make it brutal," she said, her voice steady. "Make it legal." The pit hummed with electric tension as bodies pressed against the chain-link fence surrounding the ring. Sweat and anticipation hung heavy in the warehouse air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood from earlier matches. Tonight's crowd was different. Bigger, rowdier, charged with something beyond the usual underground fight energy. Ayana stood in the corner of the ring, her face hidden behind the simple black mask that had earned her the name Ghost. Her opponent, Marcus the Mountain Torres, towered in the opposite corner, 6'4" of pure muscle and an undefeated record. His shoulders rolled beneath tattooed skin as he bounced on his toes, playing to the crowd. "Ghost ain't nothing but a kid," someone shouted from the crowd. "Heard she's still in high school." "That true little girl?" The Mountain called across the ring, his voice carrying over the jeers. "Maybe you should stick to science fairs." Ayana didn't respond. She kept her breathing steady, just as Reina had taught her. In 2-3, out 2-3. Her eyes tracked every detail, the slight favor the Mountain gave his left knee, the way he led with his right shoulder when taunting. From her corner outside the ring, Reina watched with crossed arms and tense shoulders. She'd tried to talk Ayana out of this match, arguing that the Mountain was too experienced, too strong. But something in Ayana's quiet insistence had won her over. The bell rang. The Mountain charged forward immediately, looking to end it quick. His right hook could knock out a heavyweight, but Ayana wasn't there anymore. She moved like water, letting his momentum carry him past. The crowd roared as he spun around, frustration already showing on his face. "Stand and fight," he growled, advancing again. Ayana did exactly what Reina had drilled into her. She read his rhythm. Every fighter had one, like a fingerprint in motion. The Mountain's was all power, no patience. He threw combinations that could shatter concrete, but each one cost him energy. Each miss made him angrier. Round 1 ended with the Mountain breathing hard and Ayana barely touched. The crowd's jeers had shifted to murmurs of curiosity. "He's getting tired," Reina said during the break, pressing a cold towel to Ayana's neck. "But don't get cocky. One solid hit from him." Ayana nodded once. She didn't need the warning. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about learning, adapting, understanding how to dismantle a larger opponent's advantage. Round 2 started differently. The Mountain had learned she wouldn't stand and trade. He cut off the ring, trapping her against the fence. His grin was savage as he launched a flying knee that would have ended the fight, if it had landed. But Ayana had been counting his steps, timing his breaths. She slipped the knee by inches, letting him crash into the fence while she escaped to center ring. The crowd gasped. Nobody slipped the Mountain's knee. "Lucky dodge," he snarled, but doubt had crept into his voice. Each round followed the same pattern but with subtle shifts. Ayana gave him different looks, different angles. She let him land glancing blows just to study how he followed up. When he adjusted, she adjusted faster. It wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a chess match in motion. By round 4, the Mountain was exhausted. His legendary power shots came slower, his footwork grew sloppy. The crowd had gone oddly quiet, sensing something shifting in the air. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a systematic dismantling. "End it," Reina whispered from the corner, seeing what was coming. The mountain threw a desperate haymaker. Ayanna didn't just dodge. She flowed around it like smoke, stepping into his space. Her counter combination wasn't the hardest ever thrown, but it was precise. Surgical. 3 hits: liver, solar plexus, temple. The mountain's eyes went wide with surprise as his knees buckled. He hit the canvas hard. The referee didn't even need to count. The silence in the pit was absolute. Ayanna stood perfectly still, hands at her sides, waiting for the official decision. When her arm was raised in victory, she bowed once to her fallen opponent, once to Reyna, and once to the crowd. No celebration, no gloating, just calm acknowledgement. As she left the ring, the whispers started. Nobody had ever seen fighting quite like that before. Not just effective, but elegant, controlled. The few who knew her true identity exchanged meaningful looks. This wasn't just some angry teenager looking for revenge, this was something else entirely. Later in the back office, Reyna handed Ayanna an ice pack and studied her face. The mask was off now, revealing eyes that were alert but unburdened. No adrenaline crash, no victory high, just quiet satisfaction. "You didn't just fight like a fighter," Reyna said, shaking her head slowly. "You fought like a surgeon, taking him apart piece by piece, learning while you did it. I've never seen anything like it." "That's the idea," Ayanna replied simply, pressing the ice pack to her ribs where one of the mountain's shots had glanced her. Across town, in a darkened bedroom, Jake Mitchell sat hunched over his laptop. The fight video was already spreading through private channels. He'd watched it 6 times now, his knuckles white against the desk edge. There was no doubt anymore. Ghost was Ayanna. The way she moved, the calculated patience, the absolute control. It was everything that had made him uncomfortable about her in school, transformed into something terrifying. His father's study light was still on down the hall. Jake pushed back from his desk, anger and fear churning in his stomach as he stormed down the hallway. Officer Mitchell looked up from his paperwork as Jake burst in. "I want her gone," Jake demanded, his voice shaking. "It's definitely her. She's not just fighting, she's learning how to hurt people, how to hurt me." Officer Mitchell studied his son's face for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone, already scrolling through contacts. "Sit down," he said calmly, pressing the first number. "Let me make some calls." The morning sun cast long shadows across Crestview High's brick facade as Malik DeVore walked through the front doors. His polished shoes clicked against the linoleum floors with measured precision, his leather briefcase swinging gently at his side. Students parted before him like water, sensing something important in his purposeful stride. Principal Langston's secretary looked up as Malik approached, recognition flickering across her face. She'd seen him before at school events, always impeccably dressed in his tailored suits, always polite but somehow intimidating. "Mr. DeVore," she started, reaching for the phone, but Malik raised a hand. "No need to announce me. Principal Langston is expecting me." He wasn't, but Malik's tone carried such natural authority that the secretary simply nodded. Inside his office, Principal Langston was scrolling through emails when Malik entered. The color drained from his face as he recognized who had just walked in. "Mr. DeVore, this is unexpected." "Is it?" Malik's voice was calm, almost gentle. He set his briefcase on the desk and clicked it open with deliberate slowness. "I would think after allowing systematic harassment of a student, after failing to protect her from racial intimidation, after actively suppressing evidence of these incidents, well, I would think you'd have been expecting this for quite some time." Principal Langston's hands twitched toward his phone. "Now let's not blow things out of proportion. If this is about the incident with Jake Mitchell, we've already addressed—" "The incident?" Malik's eyebrow rose slightly as he withdrew a thick stack of documents. "You mean the assault? The one you dismissed as a harmless prank while threatening students who tried to document it? That incident?" Langston's mouth opened and closed without sound. Malik continued laying out papers, his movements precise and unhurried. "This is a formal notice of intent to sue Crestview High School, the school district, and several individuals, including yourself, for racial harassment, educational neglect, and retaliation." Malik's finger tapped each document as he named them. We have documented every incident, every email, every attempt to silence students who spoke up. We have witness statements, social media posts, and particularly interesting text messages between certain staff members discussing how to handle the situation. Principal Langston's face had gone from pale to ashen. His eyes darted over the papers, catching phrases like systemic discrimination and pattern of institutional bias and punitive damages. This is absurd, he managed to stammer. You can't possibly— I can and I have. Malik's voice remained perfectly level. You'll find everything properly filed and served. I suggest you contact the school board's legal team immediately. He closed his briefcase with a soft click. Good day, Principal Langston. The news spread through Crestview High like wildfire. By third period, everyone had heard about Malik's visit. Students huddled in corners, whispering and checking their phones. Teachers looked nervous, especially those who had stayed silent during the incidents. Jamal Watson sat in the computer lab during lunch, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he built the Let Her Speak website. Around him, a small group of students helped design social media graphics and draft posts. Keep it focused, he reminded them. This isn't about revenge, it's about justice, about changing the system. His eyes flickered to where Ayanna sat alone at her usual lunch table, calmly reading a thick legal textbook. The campaign took off faster than anyone expected. Let Her Speak started trending locally, then regionally. Students from other schools began sharing similar stories. Local news outlets picked up the story, focusing on the legal challenge to the school's handling of racial harassment. Through it all, Ayanna maintained her silence. She moved through the halls like a ghost, head high, eyes forward. She didn't need to speak. Her silence had become more powerful than words. Students watched her pass with a mixture of awe and unease, understanding that her quiet wasn't weakness but strategy. The school board's response was predictable. Emails went out to teachers warning against inflammatory discussions and political topics in class. Several teachers who had shown support for Ayanna found their lesson plans under sudden scrutiny. Jake Mitchell sat in the principal's office, his leg bouncing nervously as his father spoke in low, intense tones with the district attorney and Principal Langston. The room felt too small, too warm, despite the air conditioning humming overhead. She's going too far, Jake burst out, interrupting whatever legal strategy they were discussing. She's making us look bad. Everyone's talking about it. My own teammates are starting to ask questions. Officer Mitchell turned to his son, his face hard. Then we'll give her something real to be angry about. His voice was cold, calculated. Sometimes people need to learn their place. Sometimes they need to understand that actions have consequences. The principal shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but the district attorney just nodded slowly, making notes on his legal pad. Outside on the bleachers, the late morning sun warmed the metal seats where Ayanna sat cross-legged, earbuds in, a thick legal document spread across her lap. Her finger traced lines of precedent cases, Supreme Court decisions about student rights and institutional accountability. She'd read them so many times she could recite them from memory. But she kept studying, kept looking for angles they might have missed. A shadow fell across her papers. Ayanna looked up to see Zoe standing there, holding a stack of freshly printed flyers. The Let Her Speak logo was bold across the top, followed by statistics about racial harassment in schools and quotes from student testimonies. You already started a war, Zoe said softly, holding out one of the flyers. Might as well end it your way. Ayanna took the flyer, studying the design Jamal had created. Simple, powerful, impossible to ignore. Just like her silence. She tucked it carefully into her folder of legal documents, right next to the complaint that was already sending shockwaves through the system. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in Crestview High's staff room as teachers filed in for the emergency meeting. Principal Langston stood at the front, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more brittle. Coffee cups clinked nervously as the faculty settled into their seats, the tension in the room thick enough to cut. As you're all aware, Langston began, his voice carrying a forced steadiness. "We're dealing with a sensitive situation. The school board has made it clear that our priority must be maintaining order and focusing on education." He paused, scanning the room. "We need to limit classroom political distractions. This means no discussions of recent events, no encouraging student protests, and absolutely no taking sides." Ms. Lane sat in the back row, her posture straight and dignified. She'd taught at Crestview for 23 years, long enough to recognize the familiar pattern of institutional silence. Her phone lay face down on her lap, recording. "With all due respect," Ms. Lane spoke up, her voice clear and measured, "how do we address students who have legitimate concerns about their safety and equal treatment? Isn't education about teaching them to think critically about these issues?" Principal Langston's smile tightened. "Ms. Lane, we appreciate your concern, but this isn't about debate. This is about maintaining a proper learning environment. We can't let one incident derail the entire school year." "One incident?" Ms. Lane's eyebrow arched slightly. "I've documented dozens of similar incidents over the past 3 years alone. Are we pretending those didn't happen too?" "That's enough, Ms. Lane." Langston's voice carried a warning edge. "This isn't the time or place for personal grievances. We need to present a united front." The other teachers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few nodded along with Langston, while others studied their coffee cups intently. Ms. Lane fell silent, but her fingers tapped a steady rhythm on her phone, still recording. Across town, Malik DeVore sat in his home office examining a document that had appeared in his email from an anonymous address. The school district's letterhead was clearly visible at the top, though someone had attempted to redact key portions with black marker. But they'd done a poor job. Holding it up to the light, Malik could make out crucial phrases. Immediate containment of media fallout, delete all communication related to the incident, maintain plausible deniability. Malik's lips curved into a slight smile. After 30 years of civil rights law, he knew what fear smelled like on paper. This wasn't just damage control, this was panic. Meanwhile, Ayanna moved through her school day with mechanical precision. She took notes in class, answered questions when called upon, and maintained her perfect attendance record. But something had changed in the way she carried herself, a stillness that went beyond mere composure. Students watched her from the corners of their eyes. Even teachers seemed unsure how to approach her. She had become like a mirror, reflecting back their own discomfort and guilt. Jake Mitchell felt it most keenly. He sat 2 rows behind her in AP Chemistry, watching her take detailed notes while his own paper remained blank. Her silence felt like an accusation. Every time she raised her hand to answer a question correctly, his fingers dug deeper into his desk. During lunch, he tried to catch her eye to provoke some reaction. Anything would be better than this maddening calm. But Ayanna looked through him as if he were made of glass, her face a study in perfect indifference. "She's playing mind games," he muttered to his friends, but they weren't laughing along anymore. Some had even started sitting at different tables. As evening fell, Ms. Lane sat in her classroom, carefully reviewing the audio from the morning's meeting. She'd been keeping records for years, emails, photographs, written accounts of incidents. But this was different. This was the sound of a system actively trying to bury its mistakes. Her computer pinged with an incoming email. It was from the district office, accidentally copying her on an internal thread. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the messages. There it was, the complete email chain, including the original memo about the glue incident. The district's lawyer had been explicit. Focus on the student's behavioral shift. Her involvement in underground fighting provides an excellent opportunity to reframe the narrative. Suggest she was looking for confrontation. This limits our liability and shifts focus from the initial incident. Ms. Lane's hands shook slightly as she forwarded the entire thread to Malik. 23 years of watching students like Ayanna get pushed down, silenced, blamed. Not this time. Malik's phone buzzed as he received Ms. Lane's email. He read through it twice, his expression growing darker with each line. This wasn't just institutional bias. This was orchestrated character assassination. He immediately called Ayanna, putting the phone on speaker as he continued examining the documents. "They're trying to paint you as the aggressor," he explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Using your training at the pit to suggest you were looking for trouble all along. It's a cover-up, plain and simple." Ayana's voice came through the speaker, cool and collected. Time to set the trap. Her tone carried no anger, no excitement, just the same surgical precision she brought to everything now. She had known they would try something like this. Had counted on it even. Ms. Lane sat back in her chair, surrounded by the gathering darkness of her empty classroom. The email chain was backed up on 3 separate devices now. 2 decades of watching the system protect itself, of seeing bright students ground down by the same old machinery of privilege and power. She thought of all the times she'd stayed quiet, played it safe, kept her job. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. Then, with deliberate calm, she began typing out her official statement. Every incident she'd witnessed, every conversation she'd recorded, every attempt to silence students who spoke up. The truth, in all its ugly detail. The walls of Crestview High held their secrets in shadow and silence. But secrets, like silence, could be weapons too. And some weapons cut both ways. The small flash drive landed in Ayana's locker with a soft metallic ping, sliding through the narrow vent slots. She might have missed it entirely if she hadn't been organizing her textbooks at that exact moment. The silver device lay innocently among her pencils and notebooks, unmarked except for a small piece of masking tape with one word written in neat block letters: "Watch." Ayana picked it up carefully, using the edge of her sleeve to avoid leaving fingerprints. Years of watching crime documentaries with her mother had taught her the value of preservation of evidence. She slipped the drive into her backpack's inner pocket, continuing to arrange her books as if nothing had happened. In the computer lab during her free period, Ayana found an isolated workstation in the corner, positioning herself so no one could see her screen. She plugged in the drive, her face remaining neutral as multiple video files appeared. The timestamp caught her eye immediately. The day of the glue incident. The security footage was crystal clear, much clearer than the grainy clips that had circulated on social media. The camera angle showed the hallway leading to the cafeteria, about 20 minutes before lunch period. Jake Mitchell appeared first, followed by 2 of his teammates, Trevor Collins and Marcus Weber. They were carrying their gym bags, but Jake also clutched something else, a large bottle of white glue. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked, his voice surprisingly clear on the audio feed. "Seems kind of..." "What, you going soft?" Jake's face twisted into a sneer. "Little Miss Genius needs to learn her place. The slur rolled off his tongue with casual cruelty. Trevor laughed nervously, glancing around. "Dude, keep it down." The footage continued, showing them practicing the movement. How Jake would approach from behind, the angle of the pour, the timing. They were treating it like a football play, rehearsing their positions with methodical precision. This wasn't a spontaneous prank. This was calculated humiliation. Then came the moment that made Ayana's breath catch. Mrs. Peterson, the English department head, walked past them. She clearly saw the glue bottle, heard their laughter, maybe even caught the tail end of their conversation. But she just hurried past, adjusting her glasses and quickening her pace, pretending not to notice. Ayana watched the whole sequence 3 times before copying the files to her secure cloud drive. She texted Malik immediately. "We need to talk. New evidence." That evening, in Malik's home office, they analyzed the footage frame by frame. Malik's desk was covered in legal papers, but his focus was entirely on the computer screen. He had already cross-referenced the timestamp with the school's security logs. "This is interesting," he murmured, pulling up 2 documents side by side. According to the school's policy, all security footage is automatically archived for 90 days. But when I requested these specific files last week, they claimed the system had malfunctioned that day. "They deleted it," Ayana said. It wasn't a question. "They tried to..." Malik's smile was grim. "But someone kept a copy. The question is who?" They began making a list on Malik's legal pad. Ms. Lane's name went down first. She had already proven herself an ally with the leaked emails. Zoe followed. Her social media skills and connection to various student groups could be invaluable. Jamal's name came next. His attempted protest might have been shut down, but his organizing abilities could help build a broader support base. "We need someone from the inside," Malik said, tapping his pen thoughtfully. "Someone who was there, who can verify the planning that went into this." As if on cue, Ayana's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I want to help. I was there. I can't sleep anymore knowing what we did." The message was signed simply, Chris. Chris Donovan had been part of Jake's inner circle since freshman year. Not a star player, but reliable, the kind of person who held the camera during pranks, who kept lookout during jokes, who laughed along even when he felt sick inside. But something about the glue incident had broken him. The next afternoon, they met him at the Cornerstone Cafe, a quiet spot far from the usual student hangouts. Chris arrived looking nervous, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He chose a booth in the back, as far from the windows as possible. "They'll know it was me," he said quietly as Malik and Ayana sat down. "If I do this, they'll figure it out." "We can protect you," Malik assured him, "but we need everything you have. No holding back." Chris pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly. "I saved everything. The group chat, the planning messages, the bet." He paused, looking at Ayana for the first time. "They had this whole point system for humiliating you. The glue was worth 50 points because it was public." Ayana's face remained perfectly still as Chris pulled up screenshot after screenshot. The football team's private group chat was a cesspool of racial slurs and jokes. There were photos of her at academic competitions, edited with crude captions. Recent posts mocked screenshots from her MMA matches, with comments about angry black girls and worse. But the most damning evidence was the betting system. They had turned her harassment into a game, with points awarded for different types of humiliation. Jake was in the lead, but others were trying to catch up. They had even discussed following her to the pit, planning to film her fights and expose her to the school board. "I should have said something sooner," Chris said, his voice thick with shame. "But I was scared. They have this way of making you feel like you have to go along, like you're either with them or against them." "I don't need your apology," Ayana said, her voice level and cool. "Just your honesty." Malik was already downloading the screenshots, his legal mind cataloging each piece of evidence. The group chat timestamps matched perfectly with the security footage. The premeditation was clear. The racial motivation was explicit. And most importantly, they now had proof that multiple school officials had been aware and chosen to look the other way. Chris slid his phone across the table. "Take what you need. I saved backups of everything." He started to stand, then paused. "They're scared of you, not because of the fighting, because they can't control you. Jake especially, he's never had someone just ignore him like that." Ayana didn't respond. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke loudly enough on its own, and soon it would speak to everyone. Thursday morning arrived with an electric tension in the air. Malik DeVore sat at his polished mahogany desk, methodically reviewing the final details of the formal complaint. The document was thick, nearly 50 pages of meticulously documented incidents, evidence, and legal precedents. He had spent the night perfecting every word, knowing that precision would be crucial. The complaint to the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights wasn't just about the glue incident. It detailed a pattern of systematic discrimination, administrative negligence, and institutional retaliation. Malik had woven together testimonies, timestamps, and transcripts into an undeniable narrative of injustice. While submitting the complaint through official channels, Malik simultaneously prepared a carefully redacted package for Trinity Hale. She was a powerhouse in investigative journalism, known for her unflinching coverage of educational inequality and systemic racism. Her recent series on school-to-prison pipeline had won a Pulitzer. The package included selected footage stills, sanitized chat logs, and a timeline of events. Malik had highlighted the key points: the premeditated nature of the attack, the school's attempted cover-up, and Officer Mitchell's intimidation tactics. He included Ms. Lane's recordings of staff meetings, Chris's testimony, and documentation of the deleted security footage. Trinity's response was immediate. Within hours, she had verified sources and begun conducting background interviews. Her team worked through the day, connecting dots and uncovering additional instances of bias at Crestview High. By early afternoon, the article dropped online. The headline blazed across social media: "Silencing the Genius: How a School Protected a Cop's Son and Buried the Truth." The story was devastating in its thoroughness. Trinity detailed how a brilliant black student's academic achievements had been met with escalating harassment, culminating in a racially motivated assault that the school had actively tried to suppress. She exposed the betting system, the administrative cover-up, and the police intimidation. The article included powerful quotes from students and teachers. Jamal spoke about the pattern of silencing black voices. Ms. Lane described the systemic pressure to maintain order at the expense of justice. Chris's testimony about the football team's point system for harassment was particularly damning. Social media exploded. "Our Justice for Ayanna" started trending. National civil rights organizations issued statements. Education blogs picked up the story, connecting it to broader conversations about racism in schools. Through it all, Ayanna maintained her characteristic composure. She attended her classes as usual, completed her assignments, and continued her training at the pit. When other students tried to approach her for comments, she simply nodded and kept walking. Trinity Hale made multiple attempts to secure an interview, sending requests through various channels. Her producer offered primetime coverage, a chance to tell her story in her own words. Ayanna considered it carefully but declined each time. Instead, she sent Trinity a single quote: "Control isn't silence. It's choosing when your voice hits hardest." The quote became the centerpiece of Trinity's follow-up coverage, inspiring discussions about strategic resistance and the power of calculated response. Civil rights activists praised Ayanna's disciplined approach, noting how it forced attention onto the systemic issues rather than individual drama. By late afternoon, the school board announced an emergency session. The parking lot filled with news vans, their satellite dishes reaching into the darkening sky like metal trees. Protesters began gathering, students holding handmade signs, parents demanding accountability, teachers wearing black in solidarity. Inside the school, the administration scrambled to maintain order. Principal Langston looked particularly haggard, his tie loosened and his usual confidence shattered. The office staff fielded endless calls from media outlets and angry parents. Jake was pulled from football practice by a grim-faced administrative assistant. His cockiness had evaporated, replaced by a nervous energy as he was escorted to the office. The terms administrative leave and pending investigation echoed through the hallways. Across town at the police station, Officer Mitchell received similar news. The department couldn't ignore the evidence of intimidation and abuse of power. He was placed under review, his badge and gun temporarily surrendered while internal affairs began their investigation. Through all of this, Ayanna moved through her day with unchanged poise. She took notes in AP Biology, completed a calculus quiz, and ate lunch at her usual table. Some students stared in awe, others in newfound respect. A few of Jake's former friends couldn't meet her eyes at all. She was ghost in plain sight, present but untouchable, visible but mysterious. Her silence spoke volumes, her composure telling a story more powerful than any outburst could have achieved. She had learned at the pit that true power wasn't about throwing the hardest punch, but about choosing the perfect moment to strike. The protesters' chants drifted through classroom windows. No more silence, no more fear. Signs bobbed in the afternoon sun. Black excellence matters, and justice can't be covered up. News helicopters circled overhead, their cameras capturing the growing crowd. Inside the board meeting, members huddled over copies of Trinity's article and Malik's complaint. The evidence was overwhelming, the public pressure intense. They knew that standard damage control wouldn't be enough this time. Real change would be required. Jake sat alone in the guidance counselor's office, his phone blowing up with messages he was afraid to read. His father's protection, which had always seemed invincible, had crumbled in the face of Ayanna's strategic patience. He watched through the window as more protesters arrived, understanding too late that he had never really been in control. Ayanna walked past him on her way to her final class. She didn't gloat, didn't even acknowledge his presence. She didn't need to. Her victory wasn't in his defeat. It was in the system's exposure, in the truth finally breaking through years of enforced silence. Friday morning dawned with an unusual stillness over Crestview. The school board's central office building, normally quiet and bureaucratic, hummed with tension and anticipation. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the clear autumn sky. Protesters gathered on the steps, holding signs and speaking in hushed voices. Inside the hearing room, the atmosphere was electric. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and crowding the doorway. The wood-paneled chamber, designed for mundane administrative meetings, now felt like a courtroom where history would be made. Ayanna Brooks entered precisely 5 minutes before the scheduled start time. She wore a crisp white button-down shirt and dark slacks, her natural hair styled elegantly despite the damage from Jake's prank. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes were sharp and alert, taking in every detail of the room. Malik DeVore walked beside her carrying a leather briefcase filled with documents they had meticulously prepared. His presence radiated quiet confidence, the kind that came from decades of fighting similar battles. They made their way to their designated seats at the front table, ignoring the whispers and camera clicks that followed their movement. Trinity Hale sat in the front row, her notebook open and pen ready. Her recent article had blown the case wide open, but she knew today's hearing would reveal even more. Around her sat dozens of students from Crestview and neighboring schools. Black, brown, and Asian faces united in silent support. Many wore white shirts matching Ayanna's, a visual statement of solidarity. The board members filed in, their usual self-assurance noticeably dimmed. Principal Langston sat at a separate table, his complexion ashen. Officer Mitchell was conspicuously absent, though his department-appointed attorney occupied a chair near the back. The hearing began with standard formalities: introductions, procedures, ground rules. The board chairman, a silver-haired man named Dr. Peterson, tried to maintain an air of routine business, but his hands trembled slightly as he shuffled his papers. When the board began their defense, their justifications sounded hollow in the packed chamber. They spoke of following established protocols and maintaining educational environment. They cited policies and procedures trying to paint the glue incident as an isolated occurrence that had been appropriately addressed. Then Ms. Lane took the stand. Her testimony was devastating in its precision. She played recordings of staff meetings where concerns about racial harassment were dismissed. She presented emails showing how teachers who spoke up were quietly pressured into silence. Security footage timestamps demonstrated systematic deletion of evidence. "I've worked at Crestview for 17 years, Ms. Lane stated, her voice clear and unwavering. In that time, I've documented 47 similar incidents. Each time, the administration chose protection over justice. Each time, they silenced the victims to shield the perpetrators." Chris testified next, his voice initially shaky but growing stronger as he spoke. He detailed the football team's point system for harassing certain students, the group chats filled with racial slurs, the way coaches and teachers turned blind eyes. He described how Jake and others had planned the glue attack, knowing they would face no real consequences. "We thought it was just jokes," Chris admitted, unable to look at Ayanna. "But we knew it was wrong. We knew it was cruel. And we knew we'd get away with it because we always did." Malik's presentation was masterful. He wove together testimonies, documents, and evidence into an undeniable tapestry of systemic racism and institutional failure. He showed how the glue incident wasn't just a prank. It was the predictable result of years of unchecked discrimination. "This institution," Malik declared, "didn't just fail to protect a student, it actively worked to silence her. When she refused to be silenced, it tried to destroy her reputation. When that failed, it employed armed intimidation through Officer Mitchell's abuse of power." The board members shifted uncomfortably as Malik detailed Officer Mitchell's involvement: the threatening conversations, the manipulated police reports, the attempted character assassination through social media. Each point was supported by timestamps, witnesses, and documentation. The room grew still when Ayanna finally rose to speak. She moved to the podium with measured steps, her composure unbroken. When she began, her voice was clear and controlled, each word carefully chosen. "My silence was never submission," she stated, looking directly at the board members. "It was strategy, and strategy is how empires fall." The room erupted in stunned silence. The weight of her words seemed to press against the walls. Cameras flashed, but no one spoke. Even the board members appeared frozen, confronted with the full force of their failure embodied in this poised, brilliant 15-year-old girl. The board chairman cleared his throat, but before he could speak, Ayanna continued, "You expected anger. You waited for mistakes. You wanted me to fight on your terms, in your system, by your rules. Instead, I chose patience. I gathered evidence. I built alliances. I let you think your power was absolute, until it crumbled under the weight of truth." The impact was immediate. The board huddled in whispered consultation with their attorneys. After several tense minutes, they emerged with a formal apology. Not just to Ayanna, but to every student who had suffered under their negligence. They agreed to a complete external audit of the school's disciplinary procedures and hiring practices. Ayanna stood as they read the decision. Her expression hadn't changed, but there was a subtle shift in her posture. Not pride or triumph, but the quiet satisfaction of a strategist whose plan had worked perfectly. She had achieved her goal not through force or confrontation, but through careful, deliberate dismantling of a corrupt system. She walked out of the hearing room with the same measured pace she had entered, head high, Malik at her side. The crowd of students parted to let her pass, their silence now charged with respect and awe. She had shown them a different kind of power, not the loud, explosive force they expected, but the unstoppable strength of strategic resistance. The Monday after the hearing dawned with an unusual buzz at Crestview High. News vans crowded the parking lot, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray morning sky. Reporters clutched coffee cups and microphones, jostling for position near the school's main entrance. Inside, the hallways hummed with excited whispers and the occasional flash of phone cameras. By first period, everyone had seen the breaking news. Superintendent Roberts had resigned, effective immediately. His departure statement, carefully crafted by the district's PR team, spoke of pursuing other opportunities and allowing new leadership to implement necessary changes. But everyone knew the truth. He'd jumped before being pushed. Principal Langston's office stood empty, his nameplate already removed from the door. A brief email announced his administrative leave, though the carefully worded message fooled no one. Teachers exchanged knowing looks in the hallways while students openly celebrated on social media. The system that had protected bullies and silenced victims was crumbling. The biggest shock came mid-morning when local news stations broke the story about Officer Darren Mitchell. The Internal Affairs investigation had uncovered a pattern of misconduct complaints spanning his entire career. Racial profiling, excessive force, intimidation of witnesses. All previously buried under layers of bureaucratic protection, now exposed to harsh daylight. Trinity Hale's follow-up article painted a damning picture. Mitchell had used his position to influence school policies, pressure administrators, and protect his son from consequences. His suspension without pay made headlines across the state, with civil rights organizations calling for a broader investigation into police involvement in schools. The morning's chaos peaked when Jake Mitchell walked through the metal detectors for what would be his final day at Crestview. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a defensive hunch. His designer backpack hung limply from one shoulder as he made his way to his locker. The hallway fell silent as he passed. Former teammates suddenly found their phones fascinating. Cheerleaders who had laughed at his jokes now turned away. Even his closest friends kept their distance, unwilling to be associated with his downfall. During third period, the email arrived. The school board's decision was unanimous. Jake Mitchell was officially expelled for gross misconduct and racial harassment. The evidence was overwhelming. Chris's testimony had provided the final nail, revealing not just the glue incident, but years of targeted harassment and racial intimidation. Jake wandered the halls like a ghost until final bell, ignored by everyone. His face cycled between rage and disbelief as reality sank in. His future of college recruitment and football scholarships had evaporated. His father's influence couldn't protect him anymore. Everything he'd taken for granted was gone. As students rushed to leave, Jake spotted Ayanna walking toward the parking lot. Something snapped inside him. He rushed after her, cutting through the crowd until he cornered her near the bike racks. His face was red, his breathing heavy. "You ruined my life," he spat, fists clenched at his sides. Ayanna turned to face him calmly. Other students stopped to watch, phones ready, but keeping their distance. The tension crackled in the afternoon air. Ayanna met his gaze steadily, her voice clear and controlled. "You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for it." The simple truth of her words seemed to deflate him. His shoulders sagged, the anger in his eyes replaced by something closer to fear. He opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came. Ayanna walked past him, her steps unhurried and deliberate. Jake remained frozen, watching her go. For the first time in his life, he had no power to wield, no privileges to hide behind. That evening, warm light spilled from the windows of Ayanna's home. Inside, the dining room table was set for a small gathering. Malik had arranged everything perfectly, a quiet celebration for the people who had helped make change possible. Ms. Lane arrived first, bringing her famous sweet potato pie. Raina came next, looking almost strange in casual clothes instead of gym gear. Jamal and Zoe showed up together, carrying handmade cards from students who wanted to thank Ayanna. Trinity Hale completed the group, leaving her reporter's notebook at home for once. They gathered around the table, the food and conversation flowing naturally. There was no formality, no speeches, just the comfortable warmth of people who had fought together for something important. Ayanna looked around at each face, remembering how their individual actions had created collective change. Ms. Lane's careful documentation, Raina's training in control and patience, Jamal's grassroots organizing, Zoe's unwavering friendship, Trinity's amplification of truth. Each person had played a crucial role. "I need to thank you all," Ayanna said softly during a lull in conversation. "Every move I made only worked because you helped carry it. None of this happens alone." Malik raised his glass, his eyes twinkling with pride and affection. "To legacy," he offered. But Ayanna shook her head, smiling as she raised her own glass. "Numbered to building something better." The others lifted their glasses, the simple toast carrying the weight of their shared achievement. They had not just exposed corruption, they had created space for real change. The school board was already implementing new policies. Students were speaking up, teachers were standing firm. The evening continued with stories and laughter, the warm glow of victory tempered by the knowledge that their work was just beginning. But for now, in this moment, they celebrated not just what they had torn down, but what they would build in its place. 3 months passed like a gentle tide washing away old wounds at Crestview High. The stark fluorescent hallways now held a different energy, not perfect, but pregnant with possibility. Students moved through the building with straighter spines and lifted chins, their voices carrying further than before. The independent equity audit team had set up shop in what used to be Principal Langston's office. Their presence brought a steady stream of interviews, document reviews, and uncomfortable but necessary conversations. Teachers who had once stayed silent now spoke freely about systemic issues they'd witnessed. Students shared their experiences without fear of retaliation. Dr. Amara Richardson, the newly appointed principal, had transformed the administrative culture within weeks of her arrival. Her office door stayed open during lunch hours, and she regularly attended student council meetings. Her progressive vision for the school wasn't just talk. She had already implemented new hiring practices, revised disciplinary procedures, and established mandatory cultural competency training for all staff. The Student Equity Board met every Wednesday afternoon in the library. Today, Ayanna sat at the head of the conference table, co-chairing a discussion about proposed changes to the advanced placement selection process. Around her, a diverse group of students debated testing biases and access barriers. Their voices filled the space with purpose and passion. "The data shows clear patterns of exclusion," Jamal explained, pointing to charts projected on the wall. "We need to rethink the entire recommendation system." Ayanna nodded, taking careful notes. She had grown into her leadership role naturally, her quiet strength now channeled into systematic change. Other students looked to her not with fear or resentment, but with respect and trust. The meeting concluded with concrete action items and assigned responsibilities. As students filed out, Dr. Richardson stopped by to check in. "The board's recommendations are making a real difference," she said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "You've helped create a model other schools are asking to replicate." Ayana gathered her papers, a small smile playing at her lips. "It's what should have been here all along," she replied. "We're just building it now." Later that afternoon, Ayana made her way through the industrial district to the pit. The warehouse looked the same from the outside, plain, unremarkable, hiding its power behind concrete walls. But inside, something had shifted. The familiar smell of sweat and determination greeted her as she pushed through the heavy door. New fighters were warming up on the mats, their movements careful and focused. Reina's voice carried from the ring, where she was demonstrating technique to a young Latina girl who reminded Ayana of herself 3 months ago. On the wall near the entrance, Ayana's gloves hung in a simple black frame. The label beneath them read, "Ghost, Undefeated, Unshaken." The display wasn't flashy or prominent, but its presence carried weight. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about standing your ground, about finding your power and using it wisely. Reina spotted her and called a break, making her way over. The two women regarded each other with mutual respect, their relationship having evolved from teacher and student to something deeper. "The new kids ask about you," Reina said, nodding toward the gloves. "You're becoming an urban legend around here." Ayana watched the fighters resume their training. "Ghost taught me what I needed to learn," she replied, "but there are other ways to fight now." Reina's eyes softened with understanding. "You never needed the ring to be strong. You needed it to understand your strength." "You taught me control," Ayana said, reaching into her pocket. "I'll use it for more than fists." She pulled out her gym key, holding it out to Reina. "It's time." Reina took the key, her scarred knuckles gentle. "You'll always have a home here, but you've got bigger rings to step into." They embraced briefly, the gesture containing everything that didn't need to be said. Ayana took one last look around the gym, at the place where Ghost had been born, and where Ayana had truly found herself. Then she walked out, leaving that chapter behind but carrying its lessons forward. The following weekend found Ayana standing at a podium in the downtown convention center. The youth summit had drawn hundreds of students, educators, and activists from across the state. Cameras flashed as she adjusted the microphone, her posture relaxed but powerful. "Change isn't just about tearing down walls," she began, her voice clear and steady. "It's about building something better in their place." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the attentive faces before her. "That's why I'm honored to announce the establishment of the Brooks DeVore Scholarship Fund." A ripple of interest moved through the crowd. Behind her, Malik beamed with pride. "This fund, seeded by settlement money from our recent case, will provide full scholarships to BIPOC students pursuing careers in law and STEM fields. Because representation isn't just about being in the room, it's about transforming the room itself." Applause erupted, genuine and enthusiastic. Ayana continued, outlining the scholarship's details and the application process. She spoke about systemic change, about creating pipelines for future leaders, about turning moments of resistance into movements of reform. As she concluded her speech, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed again, capturing the moment for tomorrow's headlines. But Ayana's focus was on the younger students in the back of the auditorium, their eyes wide with possibility. Stepping down from the podium, she was met by Zoe, who pulled her into a quick hug. "That was amazing," Zoe said, then tilted her head curiously. "So what now?" Ayana turned to watch the stream of young people filing into the auditorium for the next session. Their energy was palpable, their potential unlimited. They deserved more than survival. They deserved to thrive. "Now?" Ayana replied, her voice filled with quiet determination. "I build the kind of world I used to have to survive." She walked forward, no longer the ghost, but the architect. If you enjoyed the story of Ayana, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch. I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.